Not out yet. You can buy it. It's called It's Better to Be Feared by journalist Seth Wickersham. Some excerpts came out this morning, and the first excerpts came out this morning. It's pretty harsh on Bill Belichick. He may not have been the primary source for this book. He gets bludgeoned, and books all have key sources. I say, when I read a book, I can generally tell who's talking and who's not talking. That's more interesting to me sometimes than actual books. Who's leaking what? Belichick gets clobbered here, and it makes it sound like Belichick's the reason it broke up. And I want to discuss this. I'm going to first share a couple of the excerpts. One of them is, Wickersham writes that Brady ultimately left New England not only because both Belichick and Kraft refused to commit to his stated goal of playing to 45, but because he wanted to be in an organization that welcomed his input rather than ignored him. He wanted to be heard. All relationships are probably some degree like that. A second big excerpt from the book this morning. In 2018, a few years ago, they all met, Belichick, Brady, Kraft, trying to set aside their grievances. Brady came out and, was tired of taking team-friendly deals and then had no input on how the money was spent. That's different than the Aaron Rodgers situation, where he or Russell Wilson aren't taking team-friendly deals. Brady's saying, I'm giving you guys big pay cuts. How come we don't have any good receivers? How come we don't have any good tight ends? There's another moment. This is pretty harsh. Late September, Aspen, Colorado. Bob Kraft was there. It was a wealthy guy conference, I'm sure. And he was telling people as he left the hotel, he had bumped in to many of his friends at the hotel, and he said, I have to leave. We're playing Detroit. And he told one of the guys, I'm leaving the most brilliant people in the world. I'm getting smarter here, and I got to go hang out with the biggest blankety-blank person in my life, my head coach. Doesn't look good for Belichick. Also here, Kraft sometimes groaned to confidence that Belichick didn't show him any respect, but he was in no rush to get rid of him. I don't want to play for Bill anymore, Brady at one point said in 2017. So there's also a moment here where Eric Mangini, when he was coaching the Jets, Belichick, there was a coach's dinner for the NFL. Wives were there, and Belichick ignored Mangini's wife, and Mangini went over to Bill and said, hey, blankety blank, you confronted Bill about his grumpiness. So there's a lot there. Buy the book. I already have. Listen, Belichick comes off as, grumpy and intense. And caustic and incredibly difficult. You see a lot of this. I don't think it's a wild, crazy, hard to detect opinion. You see it at his weekly press conference. I am not going to defend Belichick, but I will say this, is that you had three very unique components to this relationship. You had Bill Belichick, the Northeast academic. That's where the Ivy League's at. Belichick's mom spoke 7 languages. His dad, big say in the history of scouting. So you have the grumpy Northeast academic. Very easy to play in a movie. Then you had Bob Kraft, the global visionary. Likes to get along with people, but could squish them if they got in his way. And then you had the California athlete. Joyful, fun, tends to, as this book says, be at his best, not with a chip on his shoulder, but when he's surrounded by loving and supportive people. And there's a Beatles feel to it. There really is. And I'm not some Beatles historian, but let's be honest. John Lennon was the academic, the brilliant mind. Paul McCartney was sort of the visionary. And Ringo Starr, he lightened everybody up. All brilliant. But there is a price to be paid for winning. And that price is, as Ben Franklin said, if everybody thinks the same, nobody's thinking. I tell young broadcasters, willing to be hated, willing to sacrifice, willing to be told you're wrong. Oh, you're not? Go to Twitter. Get likes. Success is hard. It's really hard. I was texting a general manager this weekend after a win, and he's like, it's so hard. That's why you have to put your arms around winning in the NFL. It's so hard. You can have a great quarterback. You can have very few holes. This GM won on the road. He's like, it's so hard, so exhausting, and so much fun and exhilarating when you win. And when I look at this book, is whoever's telling their story is going to come out looking better, and whoever says, I'm not going to talk to this author in all these books is going to come out looking worse. But in the end, none of this works without the vision of Kraft, the academic DNA of Belichick, and then Brady's ability to be the glue, to make it all work, to take pay cuts, to be joyful, to make guys laugh. I mean, you've never heard a single ex-Brady teammate, this is remarkable, ever criticize him. Like, every teammate likes it. Even the teammates that are difficult, Antonio Brown, even the teammates who could burn people out, Randy Moss. Tom's had a lot of people. Wes Welker broke Tom's heart when they let him go, and went to Peyton Manning, Tom's rival, and Wes and Brady still get along. Like, this is why it became great. Because there's a sacrifice. This book could have been written about a law firm. It could have been written about the Beatles. It could have been written about a tech company. And I would say this, is that NBA and baseball dynasties do not last nearly as long as this football dynasty. And perhaps there's something to be learned here. In the NBA and in baseball, the players' unions are much, much stronger. And in football, the players have very little power. Aaron Rodgers, I'm annoyed. Suck it up, Buttercup. See you in camp. NBA, Ben Simmons and James Harden, I'm out. Teams are trapped. Owners are trapped. League is trapped. Tom Brady's annoyed. All right, you'll have to redo your contract in a couple years. Maybe you can get out. Is that the NFL stars have no power. And so they have to sacrifice. Young professional millionaires have to sacrifice. Suck it up and deal with it. And it can actually extend a dynasty. Nobody ever wants to hear that, but maybe if you give employees in any business too much power, it's hard to sustain success. Maybe the secret to the NFL and these long dynasties is the stars. Forget just average players. Tom Brady's got no power. I mean, it took him like 18 years to be able to move. Aaron Rodgers has no power. But all I know is when I read this book, it's going to end up making certain people look bad. The excerpts this morning make, Belichick just look like no fun, and he really just got in the way of the whole thing. But I think his sort of rigid academic nature worked perfectly with Tom Brady's sort of California, joyful, sort of loving personality. And it kind of, although it was caustic a lot, it probably somewhere psychologically drove Brady to prove to this academic who will never love him, you're going to love me. I mean, how many books and stories have we heard about that? The dad that's tough on their son, and the son spends the rest of their life trying to prove to dad that he's worthy. And in a weird sort of way, this all worked perfectly. It really does. It feels like I'm reading about like Lennon and McCartney and Ringo Starr. And the greatest band ever, the greatest football team ever, none of it works without the vision of one, the academic nature of the other, and the loving joyfulness of Tom Brady, who is able to take hard coaching, take the squabbles, take the fight. I mean, folks, the greatest basketball team ever, the Chicago Bulls. We all watched that documentary. My takeaway was, damn, there's a lot of conflict. I mean, Michael had his cigars, Michael's having his fun, and there's great joy. But man, it is hard to be the greatest. The greatest band, the greatest football team, the greatest law firm, the greatest tech company, the greatest basketball team. I never thought the Patriots would be nearly as fun to look back on as Jordan's Bulls. Like, Jordan's Bulls was just crazy town. You got Rodman going to Vegas for a weekend, but you start looking at the Jordan Bulls. Who's the academic? Phil Jackson. Who's the visionary? Say what you want. Jerry Krause made that Scottie Pippen deal. And then you have the star-driven, aspirational willful athlete. We all bang on Belichick and his grumpiness. We all bang on Jerry Krause and his personal insecurities. Part of the reason it worked is those guys too. If we're all thinking the same, nobody is thinking. Read the book. Sounds fun. A lot of sacrifices. And great is really hard to pull off. All right, Joel Klatt, Peter Schrager, a member of the Denver Broncos, stopping by the show today. All